第16天，土壤的比喻。
有一个人去撒种，撒的时候，有些种子落在路旁，被人践踏了；有一些被飞鸟吃掉，有些落在石头地上，发芽不久就枯干了，因为得不到水分的滋润；有一些落在荆棘里，幼苗和荆棘一起生长，禾苗被挤死了；有一些落在沃土里，生长起来，开花结果，结实百倍。
老师，众人听到的时候，你为什么总用比喻呢？
上帝国的奥秘只给你们知道，至于别人就用比喻来讲，叫他们看见却看不懂，听见却听不明白。刚才的比喻就是说，种子就是上帝的道，落在路旁的种子，如同人听了道，魔鬼随即把道从他们心里夺走，使他们不能信上帝，以至于不能得救。落在石头上的种子，代表人听了道就乐意接受了，然而没有根，只是暂时的相信，一旦遇到试炼和考验，就退缩了。落在荆棘里的种子，代表人听了道，但是却被今生的思虑、钱财和享乐挤住了，结不出成熟的子粒来。落在沃土里的种子，代表人听了道就用诚实善良的心来遵守，以致结出许多成熟的子粒来。
今天我的心灵是属于哪一种土壤？有什么拦阻我成为他喜欢的土壤？我需要做什么来不断的结果子？
So, what soil is my heart today? It's not what is your heart, it's what's my heart. Is it a soil that's going to bear fruit, or is it soil that's surrounded by thorns, or is it rocky, or what? And every time we come to the scriptures, that's the question we need to ask. What soil is my heart today? I want to shift now to number 3 on your transformational goals, moving from power leadership to servant leadership. I was working with a large partnership of ministries in the mid-90s called the Commission. And the Commission was a gathering of 84 mission boards and denominations invited by the Russian government to actually bring Americans and Canadians to former Soviet Union to act as morality and ethics consultants to public school teachers. Did you get all that? The government of Russia invited us to be consulting their people on how to teach morality and ethics in the public schools. The reason for that is when communism fell, so did their whole set of morality and ethics. Because the communist government in Russia controlled the people by having an atheistic teacher for every grade, for every student, all the way through school. And so when communism fell, so did the system of religion of atheism. So the Ministry of Education, the government Department of Education, said we need to bring Westerners in who are Christians. We don't trust the Russian Orthodox Church. That's what they said. Okay? So anyway, we sent 1,864 different Americans and Canadians and a few Western Europeans to the former Soviet Union for 1 year each. This was over a 5-year period of time. They went to 68 different cities in Latvia, Ukraine, Russia, Belarus. So we got exposed, because I was in charge of all the training, we got exposed to the feedback from these different cities. And they were dealing with school districts that actually took them out into smaller towns and smaller villages in those school districts. So we got to see what was happening because of the feedback, not because of personal experience, but because of the feedback. And realized that at that time, the church had been under oppression for 70 years. There were two kinds of churches underground churches in Russia. There were the Baptists and there were the Pentecostals. Only two flavors available. But we got the same story, regardless of flavor, regardless of part of the former Soviet Union they came from, was that the pastors were operating in the same way that the communist bosses were in the culture. This was uniform. There wasn't a thing we could do about it. We didn't even try. We just had no capacity. Because our people were there for a year. Most of them went not knowing the language. And when they left, if they knew it, they didn't know it well enough to converse in the language. And they didn't have the stature to be consulting with pastors on how to lead. But we acknowledged that that's what we saw. And so we put it in the back of our minds. We started mentoring. This was in 1993 to 1997, that period of time, 92 to 97. We started Mentorlink in 2000. Our first big push was into the country of Colombia in South America. And went to the 5 largest cities. And we were talking, and we worked with the Billy Graham Association and the Colombian Evangelical Alliance. And we put on conferences in these 5 cities. And we were talking about this one time, and one of the key pastors, actually the president of the Colombian Evangelical Alliance, his name is Dr. said, we were talking about leadership, servant leadership, and he said, oh, what you're talking about is our pastors act like Caudillo leaders. Caudillo is a word for Latino dictator. And we realized that, hey, there's something happening here. In Russia, they were the communist bosses. In Latin America, they're the Latino dictator. Well, then we went to India. We did a lot of work in India early on. And we were talking about this, and the Indian leader said, oh, what you're talking about is the Indian guru. And then we went to Africa. And they were talking about this whole thing, and they said, oh, what you're talking about is our pastors act like African chieftains.
Try to use their model to cast over.
Yeah. And, you know, it's hard for you to see your own culture. But you all live in North America now. How do North America now? Let's not talk about Chinese churches in North America. Let's talk about how you see North American churches operate. How is the leadership model of evangelical Christians in this country? Most people would say it's the American CEO model. Now, we also went to China. What do you think they said there? Mao Zedong? Well, they were a little kinder. They said the Chinese Mandarin. Maybe that's not a word.
No, we understand. It's official. That's old Chinese culture. Mandarin means official.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, it's the idea of a strong leader who operates just like the culture around them, and he brings that leadership model right into the church. And it's a universal thing.
But what's the main title they gave to the Chinese pastor?
A Mandarin is what they call it.
就是官僚嘛，就是那个中文翻过来是，Mandarin 是 OK official。
Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Pardon?
Maybe more like a head of the family.
Head of the family?
Yeah.
Okay. No, you say no?
I think the first one's better.
Well, you all have that discussion by yourself. I'm an outsider. You just tell me what to say. Okay. Let me back up. Tell you a little bit of my story. Stephen wanted me to tell my story, and I said, well, I'm going to do it in point 3. And here's a little bit of my story. I went to Southern California to go to college. And when I got there, I started working with McDonald's. This was in 1966. I started working with McDonald's so I could pay my way through school. I didn't have any scholarships. It wasn't anything that I even thought about borrowing money to go to school. So started working at McDonald's, and this was in part of Los Angeles that was on the way from the main office in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, to the founder's ranch in Santa Barbara. His name was Ray Kroc. If you study business, you've probably heard of Ray Kroc. And Ray Kroc would often come by the freeway, get off right at our store, and I was at this point an assistant manager, and he would get out of his Rolls-Royce car in his $1,000 suit. Now, picture a $1,000 suit back in 1966. I don't know what that'd be right now. 10,000? What would a Rolls Royce cost today? $500,000? $500,000? Yeah. Well, anyway, that's what he was. He was in a very wealthy man. He would get out of his car when. First of all, when you see a Rolls Royce come up, if you see it, you know what it is. If you've seen it once. And occasionally we see one, and I tell my wife, that's a Rolls Royce. She said, how do you know that? Anyway, he'd get out of his car and he'd start picking up trash off the parking lot. And then he'd come into the store, he'd look at how we're doing with serving our customers. And back then, we didn't have Big Macs. We didn't have breakfast sandwiches. All we had were hamburgers, cheeseburgers, milkshakes, French fries, double hamburgers, double cheeseburgers. So it was not a complex thing to do, but he would analyze how we were doing in service. And so I got to know Ray Kroc because he would come by frequently when I was on duty. And not only that, I was also in charge of hiring and firing. We had about 60 employees at this particular store. It was one of the busier ones in Southern California. And I also got to know some of the key executives down in the office in Los Angeles. So my concept of leadership was you get to know the right people, you get to be in the right position, you keep climbing, and it doesn't matter who you run over to get there. But the goal is for your personal achievement. I remember one day, just to show the employees how powerful I was, to my shame, I fired 9 people. One day, fired 9 people. I was not a guy you wanted to work for. And I don't say that with anything but shame. Then, because this was in the now 1969, and the U.S. was in a war in Vietnam, I was sent a notice saying that I was going to get drafted. And rather than be drafted, I enlisted with the idea that I would go to officer school for the Army. And that means that in my mind, that I would be over in rank over a whole lot of people because I'd be a second lieutenant. That was my mind. But one of the things they had us do in officer school was they had us take one of these helmets and we painted it a glossy black. And we put decals around the top that indicated that we were officer candidates. Now the idea was that whenever you took the helmet off, you would put your hand right up the side of your head, grab the webbing that was holding it in place, and pick it up off and look down. Because if you picked it up by grabbing the lip of it, you'd get a fingerprint on it. And if the training officer saw that, you'd be penalized by doing push-ups.
You ruined the flag.
So we all did that. And one of the things they had us do on the inside of that webbing, because we'd always pull it off, look down, inside of that webbing, we put the second lieutenant's insignia. And we put it on the inside. We couldn't wear it because we weren't
Not yet.
not yet commissioned. So I said to myself, second lieutenant's not enough. So I got the first lieutenant's insignia, the captain's insignia.
On your own?
On my own. The majors, the lieutenant colonel, the full-blood colonel, and 1, 2, 3, and 4-star general, and put it on the inside webbing. So that when I looked down, I looked at the goal. Getting to the top, running over anybody or anything, so that I could get ahead. I was commissioned, and almost immediately after all my training was done, literally within a week, I was presented the claims of Christ, and I came to Christ. And the Lord began to immediately start changing my leadership paradigm. I remember very quickly running into a passage in Mark 10. And there are many others too, but just Mark 10. And you don't need to go there. I'm just going to talk you through it a bit. It's so much part of my life, I don't need to look at it right now. But in Mark 10, James and John, the two brothers, came to Jesus and said, "We want you to do, Jesus, for us whatever we ask." And Jesus said, "What do you want?" "We want to sit one on your left and one on your right in your glory." What were they asking for? Position, power, privileges. All the things you get as being number one and number two after the most popular guy in Israel at that time. And the one who they thought was the Messiah, the coming king that would overthrow all of the Roman government. That was their concept. And so here, James and John asking for number one and number two after Jesus. I understood that. I knew exactly what they're asking for. Because that's how I operated. I understood the motives, the rationale, the heart, the drive that takes that. Jesus said, "Well, hey, I can't give you that." And then we can talk about other few verses another time. But then the other 10 heard that James and John just did that. And it says they became indignant. They were incensed. They were very angry. Angry underscored. And why were they angry?
They
wanted the same.
They want to be as well.
Yeah.
Especially Peter, I guess.
Well,
Peter.
Peter didn't even mention Peter here. They all felt this way. And Jesus said, "Hey, we got a problem here, guys. Let's talk about this." And then he turned leadership upside down. He says, "You know that those who are recognized as lords of the Gentiles, and as rulers of the Gentiles, lord it over them. Lord it over them. And their great men exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. It shall not be so. Lording it over. Ruling over. But if anyone wants to be great, he'll be a servant. If anyone wants to be the greatest of all, he will be a servant of all." So leadership in the kingdom is not the same as leadership in the culture. If you apply the culture's leadership in the kingdom, you're no different than James and John or the other 10. That's the operative model of the flesh. You have to learn to be a servant. Now, by the way, Jesus did not rebuke them for their ambition. He didn't rebuke James and John for their ambition to want to be number 1, number 2. He didn't rebuke the other 10 for wanting to be the greatest or the greatest of all. He said there's a different way to do it in the kingdom. And that's what servant leadership is. So around the world, we have, in every culture that I've been in, we have ministry leaders operating in the flesh. And I'm convinced it's not because they don't know different. It's that people aren't showing them a different way of actually living. That's why I think that the reorientation of our perspective from the here and now to the kingdom, when we are audited by Jesus, makes a huge difference in our motives. By the way, a lot of the things that you're finding that we're talking about today are not things of activities or skills. We're not dealing with that at all. That's not the issue. It's not our knowledge even. It's our heart, our character, our values, and our motives. Our heart, our character, our values, and our motives. Dr.Stacy had a certain character, didn't he? He had certain motives, didn't he? And they worked themselves out in practice. But John the Apostle called it evil. So whatever Diotrephes did, don't do that because it's evil. Whatever Timothy did, do that because it's good. The Holy Spirit esteemed that, through the words of the Apostle Paul. Now, before you think that this is insignificant, you think this is a minor point in Christian leadership, let me remind you of something. A few years ago, I began talking to ministry leaders around the world. And I began asking them this question. When was the last time you taught on false leaders in the New Testament? Or heard somebody else teach on false leaders? They would look at me with a blank stare. I said, I can't remember. Now, maybe some of you taught on it, heard it, I don't know if your culture or not, but we tend to think that this is a topic we don't want to talk about in the Christian world. It's not insignificant. One of the appendices in this book brings out all the New Testament references to false leaders and lists them out. And they're in every book but Philemon and James. False leaders are mentioned. And you realize that this is a major topic. There are three, in my ways of categorizing, there are three ways to categorize a false leader. The first one is a doctrinal false leader. And most of us would know how to see that, okay? A doctrinal false leader. Heresy, teaching heresy. False doctrine. But we're talking about the majors of the doctrines, like the deity of Christ, the Trinity, things like that. We're not talking about how do you get baptized or what your church governs. Okay, we're not talking about those things. The second category of false leaders, and it's very evident, and in fact it's probably the biggest blind spot we have in the evangelical world, is character false leaders. If you look at the Pharisees in Matthew 23, remember that? Jesus says, "Woe to you, Pharisees." What does he say? Hypocrites. He didn't get on their doctrine, he got on their life, their insides. They said one thing and did another. And the third one is the ministry results or ministry outcomes. But one of the things I do there's a whole chapter designated to this in this book. It's called the topic we don't want to talk about. It's a chapter, and one of the things I do is I say, as a leader, you ought to do this study on your own and come up with your own categories, because you're going to answer to Jesus for how you led, and it'd be best for you to know how he's going to evaluate you. If you know what he doesn't want, don't do it. But you begin to look at what he doesn't want, you realize heart, character, values, and motives are almost always involved. So it's the inside. And ministry leaders who are walking in the Spirit are leading from the inside out. It's not content, it's not skills or activities, it's the heart, character, values, and motives. Inside out leadership. That's what abiding in Christ stands for in John 15. So when you have the cover, you know how to look it up. It'll be on Amazon. Let me see it. About a month from now, it should be out.
So
Okay.
Could I ask you
Yeah.
a quick question?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty important. I think it's good. The membership is to gear people toward the right directions in training new leaders. The issue is that a lot of churches, big churches, the leaders actually are very charismatic.
Right.
They already been there in this style, and they are, in a way, on the surface quite effective in terms of numbers. Would these people be willing to listen to this kind of message, or what's your experience all through when you try to push this kind of guide you to stop and reorient your values? Do these people have to listen, or they just hold their way? We see this.
I know what you're talking about.
Pretty unfortunate, because we see this phenomenon,
Yeah.
and these people are very quote unquote effective, but they already build their own empires and people follow them already.
Right.
And they may not be willing to listen.
And like God's beast, they will be evaluated in the audit. I actually talk about the whole thing in the phenomenon of numbers multiple times. And we assign importance in spirituality with larger numbers. That's not how Jesus evaluates. He gives grace to the humble. He's opposed to the proud. And a person can be a very godly person with a very large church, but because it's large doesn't mean he's godly. There are many false teachers in this country, and you probably know names in the Chinese culture that I don't know, who are false teachers that have very large ministries. They propagate their message broad and wide. And we assign spirituality because of the large number. Oh, he's a pastor of a church of 9,000 people. He must be really spiritual. I had a guy tell me this in Briar Creek, the coffee shop. I was talking about, anybody from Raleigh, you know Briar Creek.
Yeah, Briar Creek, near the airport, yeah.
And he was talking about this one particular pastor. And it doesn't matter what the name is, it's a fun. But he wasn't even questioning the guy's heart, character, values, and motives, or looking at the outcome of the ministry, what it was doing in the lives of people, or even probably evaluating his doctrine. I don't know, I've not heard any false doctrine. But I actually talk about this at great length in this book, the very topic you brought up. There's another issue, and that is organizationalism, and it's an idol. That's also dealt with. Organizationalism, where because the person's in the organization, therefore they're right. Because they're the leader of the organization, therefore they're right. And more spiritual, because they're higher up. than you are in your organization. They know they're closer to God. I can't go into all that. It's a very important question you raise. Very important.
Because it hurts, because you
It
can
does.
see that many sheep is going forward under that leading, and all things will go well. You know, sooner or later something will happen. But they just not seem to listen to the problem.
They will listen to Jesus. And the interesting, they'll say, well, Jesus, look at all I did. He said, for someone, he's going to say, well, I never knew you. Now, many will be saved, but a whole lot of their ministry will be burned up because it's wood, hay, and stubble, built on the presence and power of the flesh, and not the presence and power of the Holy Spirit. So, it's a reality. That it is a reality. I don't know where, and I don't have the mind of Jesus, but it is a reality that you will have a janitor who spent his life cleaning other people's messes in hospitals, who did it very gently, with compassion. He will have more reward in heaven than the pastor of a 10,000 member church who had these big numbers in this international ministry because he did it in the power of the flesh. Jesus is not swayed by numbers. And we're evaluated by his standard and not man. That's why this kind of thing is very important. Okay. I have until when?
11:15 or 11:30.
Okay.
Depends on how when you want to have to.
Okay. I'm going to stay for the picture, and I'm going to eat lunch here. And then Stephen and I are leaving right after lunch. So I'll go to 11:30. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right, go to number 4. Oh, before we go to that, go to the Leaders' Covenant, number 10. It should take a few minutes to read through number 10, the Leaders' Covenant. This is just personal reflection, underline anything that the Holy Spirit brings to your mind. Here's a question, the test. One name, you only get one name. Besides Jesus, who is the most influential person in the New Testament? He said Paul. Anybody else?
Must say person? Holy Spirit.
Okay, well, okay. Apart from the Trinity, that's for that. That's really true. But I think who mentored Paul? Barnabas.
Well,
Who mentored John Mark?
Peter.
Barnabas. So the most influential, in fact, influenced the epistles of Paul and the Gospel of Mark. So Barnabas, the hidden person, was the most influential in my mind. But he's not the one that's known, unless you think about it. So Paul was doing his own thing, up in way out in the desert. And Barnabas realized the job was too big for him in Antioch, and he needed the skills of somebody like Paul. And he went and found Paul. Now what I'd like you to do is to go to 2 Timothy chapter 4. And this is just a personal exercise. I'm going to give you two parts of chapter 4 rather than the whole chapter. But 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 9 to 13 and 19 to 21, how many people do you see there? Just count them real quickly.
Go to the verse again.
2 Timothy 4, 9 to 13 and 19 to 21. Okay, how many did you find?
16.
17? Anybody get a different number?
Plus Timothy.
Plus Timothy, okay, 18.
A lot.
A lot.
A lot of brothers.
Okay, interesting. Paul had all these gifts, and he did not do it by himself. He collaborated. Very evident. Barnabas collaborated. And in the collaboration, they also are developing leaders. So, what I'd like you to do is in the Leaders' Covenant, go to number 8. Number 8. Take a few minutes to read through that. Underline anything the Holy Spirit brings to your mind. Okay. Let me back up now. Go to this 5 transformational values sheet in your handout. By the way, there's a version of that, I believe, in Chinese on the website. Okay, let me ask you a question. If I'm building my empire, will I develop leaders?
No.
Why?
Because I am the leader.
I am a leader, and if another leader comes along, what happens to my empire?
Right. And still leader.
It's
Friction.
friction. Threaten the guy might split my empire. He might take away part of my empire. So he's a threat. Now, if I'm building a kingdom, do I want more leaders?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know how pastors are replaced in Egypt, in the Middle East? They die. Egyptians are telling me this. I'm not making this up. I don't have enough awareness to know. They're telling me they don't develop leaders because the church will be taken from them. It's their livelihood. And yet all these needs in Cairo and out in the rural parts in northern, or what they call upper, it's called really southern, but upper Egypt, up the Nile, Alexandria, those places, all these needs are not being met because the leaders in position don't have the capacity themselves. But if they were developed leaders and release them, they could go meet the needs on their own without the positional leader controlling it. Egyptians tell me this. I have a group of 6 younger leaders, and younger in Egyptian chronology is under 40. And if you're under 40, you're a younger leader. Well, in most cultures of the world, if you're 40, you're getting to be a senior leader. But anyway, it's just staggering. If you're building your empire, you will not develop leaders. Now, if you have an environment of legalism and controls, do you think leaders will thrive and flourish? Emerging leaders will thrive and flourish?
No.
No. They're threatened. They can't perform well enough. Now, if a leader is a power leader, do you think he's going to have other leaders come along in his system? Only if they conform. And only if they build the power leader's empire. So you see, if you're leading in the flesh, younger leaders are not going to come around. And they're not going to be developed. If the guy's operating in, what is it called? Elitism and self-sufficiency, the top of the American Indians call it totem pole. The guru's way lifted up in India. And you can't have access to him, but he can give information down in the country of India. Collaboration, leaders flourish because they're learning the problems and the issues of leaders that have a bigger sphere, the older leaders. Now, the reason why we put intentional development of leaders at the bottom, or accidental, is that the issue, if I'm trying to get you as a person, I'm trying to train you to mentor people. If I start by training you on skills and saying this is what you have to do, I haven't dealt with the issues. Because the desire to build leaders comes from the inside. It's heart, character, values, and motives of leading like Jesus and developing leaders like Jesus did. He modeled it. It is normative for Christian leaders in the kingdom who are operating in the Spirit to give themselves away to other people who emerge, some of whom would have more gifts than we have a bigger ministry than we ever have. That's the way of Jesus. It's the way of Paul. It's the way of Barnabas. It's the way of Priscilla and Aquila. It's the way of Timothy. It's the way of Titus, Philetus. You see it in the New Testament, it's just normative. You give yourself away. You see it with Peter. So if I want to encourage people to mentor, I start with heart, character, values, and motives on these 5 issues that we've been dealing with. And I talk about the difference between walking and leading in the flesh and walking and leading in the spirit. And that's what we've been doing. Now, let me illustrate one thing that is so powerful that we just, and yet it's so simple. I was in Tanzania. Did it again in Kenya, Tanzania in May of 2012. And I was in Kenya in February. And I pulled out of my wallet a $100 bill. I don't have one here. I don't want to carry a $100 bill, but I carried a $100 bill. And I carried a $1 bill. And I'm just assume, I'm going to use a 20 here, okay? But when you see this 20, consider it's 100, all right? All right, I'll put it upside down so the number's not so clear. And I gave the crowd, these were trainers, in one sense, these were evangelist church planners in another sense. And I said, I'm going to give you a choice. You can have the $100 bill. I'll give you $100 every day for 30 days. And at the end of 30 days, I'll give you that. It'll be $3,000. Now, when I pulled out the $100 bill in Tanzania or in Kenya, their eyes got really big. Because most of them don't make $50 a month. Okay? They were looking at 2 months' salary. And to think that they would get $3,000, that's 2.5 years of income for them. Now, we're not talking American dollars here. We're talking Tanzania and Kenyan dollars. And I said the other option, you have to make a choice, and I'm going to give you a chance. At the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you a chance to tell us what you would want. But I'm not going to give you the money. And I keep saying that because they think I'm going to give them the money. And I said, your other option is that I give you $1. And I double it every day for 30 days. So that's $2, $1 today, $2 tomorrow, $4 the next day. And I said, now, how many would like $100 a day for 30 days? Raise your hand. What surprised me, and I'm assuming you will know the answer, was well over half said that's what they wanted. And then I said, how many of you want this? And not quite a half took that. Now, we know what the dollar amount would be. $100 times 30 is $3,000, right?
That's huge.
Yeah, it's over $536 million. Now, at a financial level, we get it, right? We have some of you here. One of you has a doctorate in business or economics or something. Is that you? Okay. I mean, you can tell us more about this stuff than we'll ever know. But it's at the same time, we don't need to have a lot of knowledge to know this. One is the power of addition, and the other is the power of multiplication. Which did Jesus use in developing things you've heard from me, these entrust to other men, is what Paul said. As the Father sent me, so send I you. Go therefore and make disciples. It's not for you, it's for you to pass on. Now, it's interesting that using the power of multiplication makes the job very small and very doable for every one of us in this room. Because I don't have to think about training 10,000 leaders. All I've got to worry about thinking about is multiplying myself every year with somebody else. And those people I train, encouraging them to multiply themselves with somebody else. And the job becomes very simple. The power of exponential growth and multiplication. And that was the power Jesus used. It's very powerful. Another principle related to the same thing is that Jesus esteems the small, the insignificant. Right? How big was the mustard seed? What about David? Jesus uses the small to make a big impact because he uses multiplication, power of the Spirit. So, if I want to begin to make an impact in the world, I don't think, how do I go reach 100,000 people? Praise God for those who can do it. But I think about, how do I go train, equip, and mentor a couple right now? I was talking with a guy that actually teaches evangelism at Dallas Seminary. I had him a class way back in the late 70s. He was teaching a class in personal evangelism. His name's Larry Moyer. Anybody ever hear of Larry? You know what Larry does? He's an evangelist. He's concerned about lots of people coming to Christ. Probably never heard of him. But what he does is he trains people to do evangelism. And in the training of people and mentoring people in his gift, he has influenced over, he said, 30 million people in the last, since 1978. What was that? A lot of years. That's pretty good. Because he's training and equipping leaders who train and equip leaders who train and equip leaders. Let me give you another story. There were two friends. They were both in ministry. One guy's name was Sam, and the other guy's name was Tim. Now, Sam and Tim really, really had a burden for leader development. Sam and Tim were talking about it for several years, and then finally decided, we've been talking about this so long, we've got to stop talking and start doing something. So Sam says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get a conference together and recruit 1,000 people to it. And it's going to be 3 days long, and I'm going to talk about spiritual leadership. I'll get some good speakers and so on to come in and help. And he does that for 10 years. 1,000 a year, 10 years. What happens? How many was that in 10 years? 10,000 people. Now Tim says to himself, and he says to Sam, you know, I don't have the gifts you have. I don't know 1,000 people anyway. I can't do what you do. I know what I'll do. I'll train and equip 2 people. We'll train and equip 2 people, and that goes on for 10 years. Now Sam and Tim were good buddies, like I mentioned, and they got on an airplane to go to a leader development conference in another country. And Sam was going to be one of the keynote speakers because of his huge leadership development movement. Plane takes off, develops catastrophic engine problems, crashes, and everybody on board was killed. Now, what happened to Sam's leader development process in year 11? Zero. What about year 12? Still zero. Because it all was dependent on Sam. What happened to Timothy's leadership development model in year 11?
Keep on.
Kept growing.
No loss at all.
And year 12 and year 13. And most of those people didn't even know who Tim was. It's interesting, in Sam's funeral, there were lots of people. There was lots of press. because he was so well known. He was mourned by so many people. Which one between Sam and Tim raised more money? Sam. Which one got glory from people? Sam. Which one did it Jesus' way? Which one had the bigger impact? And Tim. And by year 10 it was more. And year 11 and year 12 and it just keeps growing. See, you don't have to have this big, monstrous ministry to have an impact. Jesus honors the little, the small. He uses the power of multiplication to expand your ministry to bear fruit you could never imagine because you're doing it His way. It's the way of Jesus. It's not difficult, not complex. Anybody can do it. Okay, what I'd like you to do is to go to Leaders Covenant number 5. When you're done with that one, go to number 7. Okay, I have, 5 minutes or so? Let me just give you a chance to ask any questions. I've covered a whole lot.
At personal level, when you mentor someone, in the modern day of life, you got job, he got job, and how you get close to in practice.
To me, coffee shops are great.
Okay.
or a restaurant, inexpensive restaurant.
So how many times you meet on a weekly basis? Or just every now and then share lives?
Every now and then for me, but see, I travel a lot, and I was in Madrid last weekend.
Okay.
And one of the guys who's the leader in our ministry, I've been involved in mentoring him. So I was there for the weekend. And it's more like peer mentoring at this point. Very seasoned guy.
Anything else you get in touch with by emails or Skype or something?
Skype groups. We also have something called the Mentoring Institute, and the idea is that you get people in small groups on Skype, and you go through a process, and that gives you often when in a mentoring group they can cross-pollinate. It's like Jesus with the 12. It wasn't just Jesus one-on-one with all 12 of them. They had their own community, and they learned both by failure and by success from one another. So, and Skype is powerful. You all have contacts all over, probably in Taiwan and Hong Kong and Singapore and England. And you can get to them. You can have relationships with them. Powerful.
How about other tools like Facebook?
I don't use that.
You don't trust Facebook? Okay.
Not for that.
All right.
See, the issue is person to person, not face to face. See, we're face to face right here, proximity. But I can be in the other room, we can have, or maybe in Raleigh where you're here, we can have a Skype call. I can still see you. We're person to person, even though we're not proximity. So don't be bothered by the fact that you can't get to them. And even if they're in the same town, if you live in Cary and I live in North Raleigh, well, that's a 30-minute. In traffic, it could be 45 minutes for me to get to you. Well, Skype call, why do I need to travel? Okay. Other questions?
See, one of the challenge of discipleship is that when you faithfully, you believe in that you do this, and people are also influenced and mentored by you, also effective. But how to encourage them and maintain that they also will pass it on? I will find that based on experience, some people can do that, but attrition rate actually is pretty high too. So that multiplications, there's attrition factor. You have passion on that, and people get mentored, they get influenced and mentored by that. But usually they sidetrack with other ministries. They're so busy with that, or they feel that they are not so comfortable. They say, I'm not so holy, I'm not so good character, so I am not comfortable with it.
Grace and peace. Don't lay burdens on them. People I will give myself to are people, like 2 Timothy 2:2, who are faithful, who will not just, I will make them faithful, they are faithful, and I'll invest in them. So that's why I put them in a small group to start with. I don't go one-on-one. I put them in a small group and watch. And I give everybody equally in a small group. But then the ones that are really coming to the front, well, Ben Victor's one of them, the guy from Cameroon. He came out of that, a Skype group. Grace and peace. No pressure. Just watch. Yes.
You mentioned earlier that when you receive Christ, you go through a lot of training. What I get to be the navigator.
Yes.
So when you do mentoring, is there any specific materials or way to help people? You not just talk about yourself and encouragement, but you read a book together, share the book, or what do you usually do in mentoring now?
I just did it with you all.
Watch
Just
Jesus
this?
film.
No, basically I'm doing heart, character, values, and motives, and I'm taking them to Jesus. And I will take them into they're modules that are 6 weeks long, 6 sessions long, designed for small groups to deal with servant leadership or collaboration or violence of grace or whatever. I'm going to watch how they operate and respond to Jesus. So it's not so much skills.
Like when I want to work on their heart,
Right.
so do you have any material that I can equip myself first and then before mentor to others? So we learn together how to cultivate a heart.
Yes, and the website, there's something called the Global Mentoring Project. We're also calling it the MentorLink Institute. There are free modules there you can download. And if you have any problems through the website, contact us. Contact me. It'll come to me one way or the other. Yeah, mentorlink.org. Yeah, and so the issue is not skills. It's what does the Holy Spirit lay on you and that person to work together. But it's continually pushing to the heart. Character, values, motives.
I know, I've tried that, but usually we sidetrack if you don't have anything to follow.
Yeah.
We sidetrack, we talk about ourselves, our struggles.
Yeah, right.
And then we sidetrack from how to
Right. There are two kinds of mentoring. There's what I call free-form mentoring, means there's no structure. And the other is a structured group, okay? Very, very few people do free-form well. The structured is what we advocate for everybody. Figure out something that works, but make sure that what you pick out, not just if it comes from that, wherever you make sure it's looking to hard issues, and it's short and simple. Don't get yourself in a 12-week process or a 1-year process. You can't get yourself out. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you please comment on the effectiveness of mentorship between a coffee shop or Skype versus serving together, really working together as a team?
Okay, first of all, let me deal with distance. Paul he hadn't been to Rome when he wrote the book of Romans. When he wrote 2 Timothy and Titus, he wasn't in proximity with Titus or Timothy. So, not all, being face to face is not important. So, but working together as opposed to just doing a study together.
No, versus coffee shop once a month or Skype once a while.
Working together is always better. Always better. But you can't always do it. What is not, what I didn't say here, but I need to tell you this. How many are, well, I assume most of us are over 40. Let me put that.
Basically.
Except I have no idea where you came from in Christianity in Taiwan, Hong Kong, or I don't know, or you were second or third generation in the U.S. I don't know. So I'm talking about America now. America like what I grew up in. This will be the last question, okay? Nobody valued mentoring. Nobody talked about it. They even with a different word, discipling. Now I was in the Navigators that were known for that, and I had mentors that was part of the culture of the Navigators. So, but that is not the normal evangelical Christian way of doing and developing leaders. And so our generation has no value to it. Now your generation, everything you hear is you need a mentor. And I don't know about you personally, but probably 70–80% of your generation would like a mentor. And yet of my generation, those of us who are over 40, maybe 10%, 5% might be interested in doing it if they thought it was a way to do it, if they could figure out how to do it. But not many do it. So you have this huge demand with the younger generation, and by the way, this is global, and we actually did studies on this in preparation for the Lausanne Cape Town Congress in 2010, surveyed 1,000 leaders, and their greatest burden was for a mentor. And these were younger leaders. And they did not want it from their older leaders because they saw a left-sided leader. They didn't have that terminology, but that's what they saw. So, I think we just start wherever the Lord gives you. There's everywhere in every church around here, there are younger people that want what you have to offer. You don't think you have anything to offer, that's part of the issue. But you have a whole lot to offer if you don't preach. And you come alongside. And of course in a Chinese way. They've been in Chinese way. Okay, that's it.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
I have here a small short commentary by Bob Beer and Frank Are you familiar with
Bob Beal, I like
Bob
him.
Beal?
Yeah.
And also Ten Commandments of Mentoring, taken from the Connecting by Robert Clinton.
Robert Clinton.
Do you use or do you approve of, or what do you think of this?
I know Bob Beal, I know Robert Clinton, and both are great. Anything they do is good. I will tend to focus on heart, character, values, motives. They will do more skills. And there's not much you can do in something that small, so I don't know what that's. It might be more inspiration.
Yeah, well, it is how to find a mentor and how to become one.
That's it, yeah, perfect.
I think for Bob Beal, I talked to him past year. He actually has a training right now in Phoenix. Bob Beal's focus is not necessarily on spiritual discipleship. Even though he's a Christian, he wants to be a leader, but he's focusing on helping you to achieve your goal. So it's different from the mentoring link.
Okay. So.
Thank you. We truly thank God for